Today we're talking with Dr. Robert Warren, who's on the faculty of Buffalo State College in the biology department. He's an invasive species and climate change specialist, and he's been talking a lot about how those things are interacting in our region in Western New York. One of the things that's fascinated me is his work with fire ants. He's discovered incredible large numbers of fire ants at places like Tiff Nature Preserve, Times Beach Nature Preserve, and even the Stella Niagara Preserve on the Niagara River, the lower Niagara River. Well, good morning, my brother, Dr. Robert Warren. Thanks for visiting us with us today. I know you're involved in the last few days, perhaps, of the Buffalo State semester. How's school going?
Well, I think what I've been saying with all respect and understanding to this is what we had to do is it's twice the work for about a tenth of the satisfaction. And I think the students are feeling exactly the same way on the other side.
Well, of course, all the students are at home. There's no college life on campus these days, so it's a big change, and it's tough on everybody. And I feel badly for you and other professors and teachers and the students. But you're going to get through it?
Yeah, we still have 2 weeks left. We've made the best of it. I think for the students, their safety net has a lot bigger holes in it than for the faculty. So there's a lot more. I'm hearing a lot going on out there for the students that's very difficult, from a financial and social aspect. So I think it's just got to be patient and roll with it and hope we're not back here in the fall, but I would not be surprised.
Well, being patient is really the big thing. I mean, we don't know how long this is going to last. This is a terrible crisis that's going on in our entire planet, certainly in Western New York. And I'm just glad that most of us still are healthy. And
Yes.
hopefully we'll be back in the fall, hopefully, if not soon after that. I've talked to folks a little bit, introduced you as, Buff State professor in the biology department, talked a little bit about your invasive species and climate change connections that you're making with your classes. I also want to talk a little bit about the fire ants. Fire ants may not be the best topic that you want to talk about today, but it's certainly a big issue for us. You've done a lot of work on it. Tell us what you've discovered. I know at Tiff, Times Beach, places like Stella Niagara, what are fire ants? Why are they here? What can we expect?
Sure. So, not to get too elementary, but so in Western New York we have the European fire ant, which is Myrmica rubra. It's a northern latitude ant. It does have a sting, hence the fire ant name. The sting's about equal to that of a stinging nettle. For those of us that have lived in the South, when we hear fire ant, we think of Solenopsis invicta, which has a much worse sting, very aggressive ant, and it changes your whole behavior. To this day, I still walk around open patches that are southern fire ant territory, or if I walk through them, I'm on edge because you step on a couple of those nests and you never forget it. Not that the European fire ant isn't problematic. And so the current thinking, which I think is pretty accurate, is that the fire ant came over on ship ballast. So back in the day, before they used water to balance out cargo ships, they used soil and stone. So you tend to find this ant near ports. And so whether it's in New Brunswick, Maine, or Western New York, it's probably they came in on the soil from ballast ships. The interesting thing about these is they're all pretty much the same ant. Whether you're in Maine or New York or Canada, they do not sexually reproduce in the invaded range. They just split. Essentially, colonies split. They have more, and they split. There's no aerial mating flights, which is something you would see in their home range, where the males fly up in the air, females fly, they meet, have coffee, disperse. So they are fascinating in terms of their lifestyle in the invaded range is very different than their lifestyle in the home range. part of then, I'm sorry.
No, go ahead.
Um, so I've used them kind of as a guinea pig to test one idea, which is that non-native species are successful because they're clones. And if the more and more I'm doing research into this, the more I'm discovering almost all of our really successful non-native invaders do not sexually reproduce, which goes against everything we learn in biology and ecology, that genetic exchange is the most important thing.
So these large colonies, which maybe number in the billions, even at Tift, is just one ant basically that's cloned.
Essentially, genetically, one ant. And
That's
so
crazy.
if you take, and we've done this, if you take workers from, how about Fort Niagara, there's populations there, and you take ants from Tift, and you take ants from Times Beach, put them together, they're like, hey, Julie, how are you? I'm fine, Shirley. How's your day? You do the same with native ants, they rip into each other. You're not in my family, right? So there's no intraspecific competition amongst these ants. Interestingly, probably the worst invasive ant that I know of right now in the East is the Asian needle ant, Brachyponera chinensis, which is invading forests of the South like crazy. Like crazy, I don't know a better word. Shockingly fast and extensive for someone who's done a lot of research and spent a lot of time in the southern forests. I'm in awe of how fast they're spreading. Did the same thing 2 summers ago. We collected Asian needle ants from Georgia, North Carolina, and South Carolina. Put them together, they're friends. Did the same with the native ants. It was a nasty fight. So they're pretty much, they're all the same ant. So this is a pattern.
Well, I'll use your phrase. That really is crazy. I mean, it's astounding to think of how that works. What impact does this species have on a place like Tift or Times?
Yeah, so at Tift, we've documented it. It's been documented in Maine, Canada, pretty much a 95% reduction in the native ants. So it homogenizes the ant communities into one.
And that has other impacts, obviously, on the ecosystem.
Yeah, it's not good. Not good at all. You know, we did one experiment a few years ago where we actually removed Myrmica rubra in patches at Tift. And then, of course, we had our controls where we didn't remove them at all. And the only place where we found native ants appear over the summer were the patches where we removed the invasive ant. So they are devastating to the ant communities. We're just finishing up research right now that suggests they're pretty hard on the amphibian communities as well. They will sting and bite frogs and things like that. Toads, on the other hand, eat them. They're like, oh, it's a spicy food. I like the ant.
Well, it certainly sounds like the consequences of these and other invasives can be tragic. And in the time of climate change, let's talk about climate change a little bit. What's going on in the world and what's going on locally? What can we expect?
Yeah, well, I would say the one thing that's nice about Buffalo is it's not going to be as extreme here. Um, North of us, lots of changes. South of us, changes, but Buffalo, this area and region at this point is somewhat spared. It hasn't been dramatic yet. We'll probably see bigger storms, more snow, some things like that. And it's really going to be interesting to see how the bird populations are impacted. Um, in terms of, there's some indication that some of the more southern birds are moving up here, which to me highlights the fact that, we need to have an intact landscape. This is going to be the problem, is if things need to shift, they're going to need intact landscapes for home, shelter, food, and so forth.
What do you mean by an intact landscape?
Right. So we need forests, we need fields, right? We need we need native plants. I mean, that's really what it is we need native plants. Um, a landscape without native plants is a desert for all the other trophic levels. And there's just um, the data are clear on every level. There, it's, it was what I like to point out is when you see news footage of a entire landscape wiped out by a hurricane, nobody goes, "Why have the people moved out of that area?" Like it's no mystery. Their homes are destroyed. Their food options are destroyed. But then when people look at a landscape such as Western New York, where the forests are fragmented and it's full of non-native species, and then go, why are we losing 1 billion birds? Why is there an insect apocalypse? You destroyed their homes. You destroyed their food. It's not a mystery.
I think there's an awful lot of bad news associated with what we're going through in 2020, but there's also maybe some good news. As you pointed out, the impacts in Western New York will be modified somewhat by our location, our climate, our water, but we have to do more than we're doing, I think. I mean, we have to think about how we plan, how we develop, where we do that stuff. There are some places that maybe have to become nature reserves or some sort of reserve for
Oh,
ecology.
many more.
And so as we go through this crisis that we're going through, we have a lot more time maybe to be indoors, to be pondering our future before we actually go out and do actions. We're kind of stuck inside. Maybe we should be thinking about what our actions are going to be next. I mean, I know a lot of people are talking about it's great for the birds, great for the wildlife now because the people aren't out there. People aren't out there emitting, carbon and creating dirty air, and the birds are relatively unencumbered. I've heard that there's more shorebirds now along certain parts of the lake this spring than usual because there aren't that many people out there. So, how are we going to do this?
Right, right. Well, and I would say pollution is important. Climate change is very important in terms of temperature and weather and so forth. Um, but the bottom line is you have to have a home and you have to have food. So I think and of course, the larger the area that's connected, the better. And I look around and I see my yard, for example. Yeah, I plant native plants around my yard, but it's only going to host so many species. We need big contiguous areas to for lots of species. And we have potential areas. If you look at Western New York, it really lacks the large scale parkland you see in other places. And it'd be really cool. And I know nature conservancies are doing it and certain things. The more we can connect those and the more we have, the more species we'll have. I mean, it's not rocket science. It's not easy, but it's not rocket science.
Well, you brought up fragmentation early on in the discussion. That's obviously a big impact as we divide up these former natural areas and create a little fragment of forest, a little fragment of meadow, and everything else is developed. One of the things that we do have here is we have some parkland and we have things like Erie County forests, which are hardly touched. There's lots of opportunities. We just have to think
Yeah.
through it and work on it. And I know that you and I have done some work together at Times Beach and some other places. These are big issues. There's lots of complications, lots of problems ahead, but we can do it if we put our minds to it and find a way to put our hearts and souls and our budgets to it. Robert, we're kind of getting close to the end of the time here, and I don't know what else you want to talk about. I'd be glad to talk about other things, but I did want to mention the Buffalo State Arboretum. I know you've been involved with that. Can you tell us a little bit about what that is?
Sure, sure. So we use the campus as an arboretum, and it's historical arboretum dating back pretty far. And I'm sorry if I don't remember the dates. A lot of the trees have been lost over the years, both from development pressures and disease. Buff State, elm trees and green ashes and all that have been lost. So the arboretum has been an effort to replenish the trees of campus. What's really nice is the Arboretum has taken a very forward-thinking approach and focuses mainly on not on I'm sorry on planting native trees. Part of that is just being progressive and thinking of how to integrate an urban landscape into the natural landscape. And part of it is in recognition that Buffalo State is right in the middle of a big migrating bird rest stop. You know, as you well know, and most Western New Yorkers, a lot of these birds go over to Forest Lawn. They see the trees as they're migrating. They go over there, spend a couple days, maybe get some food. I think Buff State could be part of that. We could add the Buff State to be, a stopover for these migrating birds, and we're working towards that.
Well, birds use all territories, but there is that little corridor that goes along Skejackwada Creek from the Niagara River right up to Forest Lawn, and Buff State is right there. So
it could all be connected.
It's an important thing to think about. Anything else you want to throw into this conversation before we wrap it up, my friend?
Oh, these were great questions. What fun. This is a fun thing to do during a pandemic, huh?
Well, it's a way to keep connected, and that's something we all desperately need to do. And it's great to see your face and hear your voice and talk about these things.
Well, I'm loving your pictures and things that you're posting, so I've been enjoying that. I'd love to see the radar of all the birds returning. It's always heartening, isn't it?
I get that from Tom Kerr, Buffalo Audubon, my son Jay Jean. We've been looking at radar for a dozen years now, and it's amazing. And last night we had a big radar burst of migrating birds, which is the first one
that was so
of the
cool.
spring. If you go out there today, you're going to see birds that have fallen out overnight, and hopefully for the next 3 or 4 weeks. So thanks.
Well, and on that note, I mean, this is my favorite thing about spring is you have got to be tough to live through spring. If you're a plant, one day it's 60 and sunny and the next day it's snowing, and they all survive, not the things that people put out, but the native things, they are just tough. And these birds, it's long distance flight through the cold, the wind, all these things are tough as can be. And I'm always so respectful of the spring life.
Oh my gosh, some of these birds have come from as far away as the Amazon basin and maybe even further, and they're going to be breeding here, like some of our swallows. So we're creating babies here to go back to the Amazon next winter. So we're helping preserve the Amazon by helping preserve the biodiversity. There's also birds here that come and go to the Arctic and the far west boreal northwest coast. We're an amazing bird area, and they are tough. It's amazing. Think of a little hummingbird, which about as big as my thumb, which weighs less than an ounce. It flies nonstop across the Gulf of Mexico during its migration.
If they were our size, we'd be extinct.
Yeah.
They'd beat the tar out of us.
Yep. And we're capable of making them extinct too if we're not
on the road.
Very deliberately careful. We
I
are
agree.
on the road. But we can fix it. We can do it, and we have to.
Yep.
So once again, thank you, my friend.
Oh, good to see you, Jay.
Look forward to having a cup of coffee with you and a walk out in the world with you sometime before spring goes away, but probably not.
No, probably not. But yeah, who knew how great those little moments were until we can't do them.
Exactly.
So anyway, all right.
Thank you.
Good to talk to you, my friend.